My name is Carolina Del Rio, and this is my technology evaluation report. My lesson consisted of the students finding the speed of a marble. They had to build a ramp in order to measure the distance the marble traveled and create a data table representing the average speed of the marble. After they had found the average speed of the marble, they were to create a graph showing the speed the marble traveled. I had a few objectives with this lesson. The objectives of my lesson was for students to practice dividing decimals, find the mean of a data set, use formulas, and determine the speed of a marble as it travels down a ramp. I felt that the objectives for this lesson were met by this particular activity. The students were able to practice dividing decimals by having to find the mean. The students were able to use formulas by having to use the formula to find the average speed of the marble. Through this lesson, all 4 objectives for my lesson were met. The following is some evidence and student work. Here are some students creating the ramp that the marble will travel down. This is a picture of one of my students working on his presentation. Here's an example of a presentation my students created using the iPad. Here you see my students rolling the marble down the ramp. A student recorded the time with the iPad so that they could later calculate the average speed of the marble. I made a few revisions to the lesson before implementing it. One thing that I revised before I taught was I had the students roll a marble instead of the car toy. The marble seemed to travel faster and easier down the ramp. There are revisions that I would want to make now that I have taught the lesson. One thing that I would want to change would be to have the students create the distance time graph on the iPad application instead of on the paper. I would also let the groups record all 3 graphs to give the variations of what they think each one should look like. This would create some discourse among what the students demonstrate and what they know. Another revision I might consider making would be to create stations in which students have different activities. So they're doing the activities in a different order, so they're actually discovering stuff on their own. The last revision I would consider making would be to give more time for the students to get comfortable with the iPad before actually creating presentations. So some of my students were not comfortable with creating the presentation on the iPad or did not know how to use and navigate the application well. Overall, I would have to say that this lesson was a good lesson that incorporated or integrated math and science. I look forward to teaching it again next year with improvements and revisions.